Those were the days.
Hey everyone, it is Justin Lee Harold. I am back with another episode of Those Were the Days Extended. Thanks for joining me. And today I am actually taking you back to November 13th, 2017, when JJ shot Theo, not realizing it was him. But just to give you a little backstory here, JJ and Lonnie, who are both partners and boyfriend-girlfriend at this point, they responded to a break-in at a warehouse off of Horton Town Square, where they found a unknown JJ sort of running from the scene. They came upon an overstimulated and scared Theo, whom he shoots, unfortunately. And just a reminder that Theo is autistic and struggles with how to navigate sort of overstimulated and high intense situations. So it became a little bit of a standoff with JJ with his gun pulled and Theo with his back towards him. And it became this weird sort of standoff of I think both of them being incredibly scared and frightened of what was going on, but not sort of thinking clearly. Theo is he's dealing sort of with his autism and being overstimulated, and JJ, sort of a little bit of a hothead cop here, is looking to sort of stop crime and prove himself here. But JJ, not knowing who the assailant was, JJ not knowing the assailant was Theo, came upon him and turned him over, and was immediately horrified when he realized it was Theo, and completely rattled with guilt. Theo was then rushed to the hospital, where he unfortunately falls into a coma for about almost a month, like 3 weeks to a month, and then is revealed to be paralyzed from the waist down. Now, just to give you a little bit of behind the scenes here, this story came about because, if you remember, in the news, there was sort of a topical conversation of police brutality / excessive force, and excessive force especially targeted towards Black men and minorities and people of color. And I think the writers wanted to sort of take on something a little topical to kind of move the storyline along. The storyline was not that greatly received, I think, because a lot of people were focusing, I think, on the racial issue of it. And I think that's where the writers were putting a backseat to that part of it. And I think they were really trying to focus on the idea of excessive force with cops and the police force and assailants. And I think they put sort of the racial issue to the sort of on the back burner to the side of that. And I think that's what people were responding to. But I think their ultimate goal was to sort of make a comment on that. And then we sort of, I think they did it in an interesting way by using Theo, who again is he deals with autism and being overstimulated, and how that would affect how he would respond in a situation like that, versus JJ, who at this time has sort of a little bit of a reputation of being a hothead cop. He had been in trouble with the Salem PD before. I think even Hope had taken away his badge at one point. He was suspended. So this is him sort of coming back to the force, him sort of wanting to prove himself. And then he finds himself in this situation again. And of course, that leads us to Abe, who is one of the most sanest and calmest people around. Of course, he was enraged by what happened to Theo, and he was not such a fan of JJ from his previous temper issues on the force, and also didn't like the fact that he was involved with Lonnie at this time. So kind of shooting Theo in the standoff that they had really tipped the scales and forced Abe to make a declaration to Jennifer that the Hortons and the Carvers would never be close again, as well as demanding that Lonnie end her relationship with JJ. And the reason why I picked this photo, I wish I found a different one that showed the whole scene, but this was taken from a specific clip where him and Jennifer were sort of not going at it, but I think she was feeling immense guilt for what JJ had done. And then Abe was just enraged about what JJ had done. And it was them sort of coming together. And again, they have a rich history with each other. Abe and Jennifer were always friends, but especially I think the scene was pretty poignant because it also comes off the heels of Abe and Jennifer working so closely together on his mayoral campaign. If you remember, Jennifer was his campaign manager, where again they became even closer friends, and their families became even closer during that point. So to then fast forward to what we have now in a situation where they're both at opposite sort of ends of the spectrum, so to speak. And Jennifer is feeling sorry for what happened, of course, to Theo, but also wanting to protect her son and knowing that he didn't do this out of malice. But then you have Abe sort of feeling like JJ's issues were not put in check enough, and that he's reeling from, of course, his son being not only shot but paralyzed, but also not wanting JJ to have anything to do with Lonnie, who he's in a romantic relationship with, of course. So yeah, interesting dynamic that we're dealing with, all while Theo is still in a coma and dealing with paralysis. Give you a little history on the plot here. The reason why Theo was there in the first place is because he was working for the family company, the Demiras, and he was working alongside Chad, Andre, and Kate. And then Demir Enterprises found out someone was targeting their servers and stealing intel. And Theo, being the resident tech guy, decided that under Kate's plan, he wanted to volunteer to kind of break in and figure out who was doing this and hurting their company. And he felt it was his obligation or duty as the grandson to sort of pitch in and figure this one out. So there was a lot of residual guilt there, especially coming from Kate when this happened, especially. But fast forward, all's well that ends well. We eventually have Theo finally wakes up from his coma, comes to terms with his paralysis, and sort of takes responsibility for his part in this kind of not fatal but unfortunate showdown he had with JJ. And he actually forgives JJ for shooting him. And then he actually does a surprising thing where he is questioned about what he was doing and how sort of all this sort of came about with him in the warehouse. And then he actually covers for Kate and tells her that he forgives and loves her and will always consider her family. And this actually is one of my favorite scenes, not only of this particular plot line, but the show in general, because I think it harkens back to this plot line where, if you guys don't remember, that Kate and Stefano were, of course, married. A lot of their marriage took place during Theo's childhood, and Theo was especially close with Kate. I know they make a lot of references when he comes on about his relationship with Stefano and him calling him No, and that relationship that they had, but he also was actually even closer to Kate at that point, and Kate was sort of the other grandmother to sort of Celeste, who was his only grandparent at that point. So there was a lot of harken back to their shared experience being Demiras and being in the same household, and how she was so kind to him when he was younger, and they really connected. Through his autism, he really didn't relate to a lot of people, but he actually related to Kate, surprisingly. And so they had this bond since they were young. So that definitely 100% affected the way he felt about her, and how he didn't place any blame, so to speak, at her feet for what went down, and that he took responsibility for it. And the storyline sort of ends with it's sort of the ushering out of the Theo character, sort of dealing with his paralysis. He actually goes to go seek treatment in Africa under the guise of his uncle Cameron and his grandmother Celeste. So that's sort of how that storyline wrapped up. But it was an interesting one where the writers sort of took, again, something topical that was going on in the news and decided to put their spin on it and use sort of the characteristics of the characters to sort of make it work. Again, it wasn't as well received as they would like it to be, but I think it was a great way to sort of address some of the things that were going on. One way, we knew that Carl Pettis, who played Theo here remarkably and won an Emmy for it, he was sort of leaving the show, so it was a way to usher him off the canvas. It was also a way to usher sort of JJ's temper issues that we had been dealing with, and they had been starting, and it seemed to be a running thread with him. It was also the tension between him and Abe regarding him being with Lonnie and having those issues. So I think that it may not have worked maybe as a topical point in terms of how it related to the audience, but I think it 100% worked as a plot device for the show. And kind of, again, it sort of changed JJ's trajectory a bit. We know it changed Theo's trajectory. It sort of ushered him off canvas until he came back for the occasional visit. So yeah, that was this week's Those Were the Days. And I will see you next time when we do another episode of Those Were the Days Extended. Take care.
No!